Now when they had gone, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, Get up, take the child and his mother, and flee to Egypt, and stay there until I tell you, for Herod is going to search for the child to kill him. So Joseph got up and took the child and his mother while it was still night and left for Egypt. He stayed there until the death of Herod. This happened so that what had been spoken by the Lord through the prophet would be fulfilled. Out of Egypt I called my son. Matthew 2:13 through 15. The following are selected readings from the visions of Blessed Catherine Emmerich in regards to the flight into Egypt, the second sorrow of Mary. I had a view of Jerusalem and saw Herod having numbers of men summoned as when soldiers are called up with us. These were led into a large courtyard and given clothes and weapons. They wore something like a half moon on one arm. They carried spears and short, broad swords like chopping knives. They wore helmets, and many of them had wrappings tied around their legs. All this must have been connected with the massacre of the innocents. Herod was in a very uneasy frame of mind. February 26th. I still see Herod exceedingly uneasy, just as he was when the three kings asked him about the newborn king of the Jews. I saw him taking counsel with several old scribes who read from very long parchment scrolls fastened on rods which they had brought with them. I saw too that the soldiers who had been given new clothes 2 days ago were sent to Bethlehem and to various places around Jerusalem. I think that they were sent to occupy the places whence the children were to be brought by their unsuspecting mothers to Jerusalem. The soldiers were intended to prevent any insurrection when the reports of the massacre reached the children's homes. February 27th. Today I saw Herod's soldiers, who had started yesterday from Jerusalem, arriving at 3 places. They came to Hebron, Bethlehem, and another place lying between those two in the direction of the Dead Sea. I have forgotten its name. The inhabitants had no idea why these soldiers had been sent to them and were somewhat disturbed. Herod was crafty. He kept his own counsel and sought in secret for Jesus. The soldiers stayed in these towns for some time. Then, when Herod completely failed to find the child born in Bethlehem, he massacred all the children under 2 years of age. I saw Joseph in his room, lying on his side, asleep with his head on his arm. I saw a shining youth come up to his bed and speak with him. Joseph sat up, but was heavy with sleep and lay down again. The youth took his hand and pulled him up, when Joseph came to his senses and got up, on which the youth disappeared. Joseph then went to the lamp burning in front of the fireplace in the center of the house and lit his own lamp at it. He knocked at the Blessed Virgin's room and asked whether he might come in. I saw him go in and speak with Mary, who did not open the screen before her bed. Then I saw him go to his donkey in the stable and afterwards into a room where all kinds of things were kept. He prepared everything for their departure. As soon as Joseph had left the Blessed Virgin's room, she got up and dressed for the journey, before going to her mother and telling her of God's commands. Anna got up, as did Maria Healy and her little boy, but they let the infant Jesus go on sleeping. For these good people, God's will came first of all. Sad at heart though they were, they hastened to make all preparations for the journey before allowing themselves to give way to the sorrow of parting. Anna and Maria Healy helped to get everything ready for the journey. Mary did not take nearly so much with her as she had brought from Bethlehem. They packed up nothing but a moderate-sized bundle and a few blankets, which were taken out to Joseph to be loaded on the donkey. Everything was done quietly and very quickly, as was proper for a journey undertaken secretly after a warning at dead of night. When Mary fetched her child, she was in such haste that I did not even see her wrap him in fresh swaddling clothes. Then came the farewells, and I cannot describe how moving it was to see the distress of Anna and her eldest daughter. They embraced the infant Jesus with tears, and the little boy too was allowed to take him in his arms. Anna embraced the Blessed Virgin again and again, weeping as bitterly as if she were never going to see her more. Maria Healy flung herself onto the ground in tears. It was not yet midnight when they had left the house. Anna and Maria Healy accompanied the Blessed Virgin on foot for a short part of the way from Nazareth, Joseph following with the donkey. The way led towards Anna's house, but rather more to the left. Mary carried the infant Jesus wrapped in swaddling clothes before her in a sort of sling, which went round her shoulders and was fastened behind her neck. She wore a long cloak which wrapped both herself and the child, and a big square veil fastened round the back of her head and hanging in long folds beside her face. They had not gone far when Joseph came up with the donkey, which was carrying a skin of water and a basket with several compartments containing little loaves of bread, small jugs, and live birds. The baggage and blankets were packed round the side saddle, which had a footrest hanging from it. They embraced again with tears, and Anna blessed the Blessed Virgin, who then seated herself on the donkey, led by Joseph, and they started off. While Catherine Emmerich was describing the grief of Anna and Maria Healy, she wept copiously herself, saying that in the night, too, when she saw this vision, she could not help shedding many tears. March 2nd. Early in the morning, I saw Maria Healy with her little boy going to Anna's house and sending the master of the house and a manservant to Nazareth, after which she went to her own house. I saw Anna putting everything in order in Joseph's house and packing away many things. In the morning there came 2 men from Anna's house. One of them was dressed in nothing but a sheepskin, and had on his feet thick sandals strapped round his legs. The other had a long robe on. He seemed to me to be Anna's present husband. They helped to arrange everything in Joseph's house and to pack up what was movable and take it to Anna's house. During the night of the Holy Family's flight from Nazareth, I saw them passing through various places and resting in a shed before dawn. Towards the evening, when they could go no further, I saw them stopping at a village called Nazareth, in the house of people who lived apart and were rather despised. They were not proper Jews, and their religion had something heathen about it. They worshipped in the temple on Mount Gerizim near Samaria, approached by a difficult mountain path several miles long. They were oppressed by many hard duties and were obliged to work like slaves at forced labor in the temple at Jerusalem and other public buildings. These people gave a warm welcome to the Holy Family, who remained there the whole of the following day. On their return from Egypt, the Holy Family once more visited these good people, and again when Jesus went to the temple in his 12th year and returned thence to Nazareth. This whole family later received baptism from John and became followers of our Lord. This place is not far from a strange town high up, the name of which I can no longer remember. I have seen and heard the names of so many towns in this district, among them Leggio and Masaloth, between which I think Nazareth lies. I believe that the town whose situation I thought so strange is called Leggio, but it has another name as well. Sunday, March 4th. Yesterday, Saturday evening, at the close of the Sabbath, the Holy Family traveled on from Nazareth through the night and during the whole of Sunday. And the following night I saw them hiding by the big old terebinth tree where they had stopped in Advent on their journey to Bethlehem, when the Blessed Virgin was so cold. It was Abraham's terebinth tree, near the grove of Morah, not far from Sichem, Thanat, Silo, and Arumah. The news of Herod's pursuit had spread here, and the region was unsafe for them. It was near this tree that Jacob buried Laban's idols. Josue assembled the people near this tree and erected the tabernacle containing the Ark of the Covenant, and it was here that he made them renounce their idols. Abimelech, the son of Gideon, was hailed here as king by the people of Sichem. March 5th. This morning I saw the Holy Family resting in a fertile part of the country and refreshing themselves beside a little stream where there was a balsam bush. The infant Jesus lay on the Blessed Virgin's knees with his feet bare. Incisions had been made here and there in the branches of the balsam shrub which had red berries, and from these incisions a liquid dripped into little pots hanging on the branches. I was surprised that these were not stolen. Joseph filled the little jugs which he had brought with him with the balsam juice. They ate little loaves of bread and berries which they picked from the bushes growing near. The donkey drank from the stream and grazed nearby. On their left I saw Jerusalem, high up in the distance. It was a very lovely scene. March 6th. Zacharias and Elizabeth had also received a message warning them of imminent danger. I think the Holy Family had sent them a trusty messenger. I saw Elizabeth taking the little John to a very hidden place in the wilderness, a few hours' distance from Hebron. Zacharias accompanied them for only a part of the way to a place where they had crossed a small stream on a wooden beam. He then left them and went towards Nazareth, by the way which Mary followed when she visited Elizabeth. I saw him on his journey to Nazareth, where he is probably going to obtain further details from Anna. Many of the friends of the Holy Family there were much distressed at their departure. Little John had nothing on but a lambskin. Although scarcely 18 months old, he was sure on his feet and could run and jump about. Even at that age, he had a little white stick in his hand which he treated as a plaything. One must not think of his wilderness as a great desert of waste sand, but rather as a desolate place with rocks, caves, and ravines, where bushes and wild fruits and berries grew. Elizabeth took the little John into a cave in which Mary Magdalene lived for some time after Jesus' death. I cannot remember how long Elizabeth remained here hidden with her young child, but it was probably only until the alarm about Herod's persecution had subsided. She then returned to Judah, about 2 hours' distance away. For I saw her escaping again into the wilderness with John when Herod summoned the mothers with their little sons up to 2 years of age, which happened quite a year later. I saw the Holy Family after they had crossed some of the ridges of the Mount of Olives going in the direction of Hebron beyond Bethlehem. They went into a large cave about a mile from the wood of Mambre in a wild mountain gorge. At this mountain there was a town with a name which sounded like Ephraim. I think that this was the sixth halting place on their journey. I saw the Holy Family arriving here very exhausted and distressed. Mary was very sad and was weeping. Everything they needed was lacking, and in their flight they kept to byways and avoided towns and public inns. They spent the whole day here resting. Several special favors were granted to them here. An angel appeared to them and comforted them, and a spring of water gushed forth in the cave at the prayer of the Blessed Virgin, while a wild she-goat came to them and allowed herself to be milked. A prophet used often to pray in this cave, and I think Samuel came here several times. David kept his father's sheep near here. He used to pray here, and it was here that he received from an angel the order to undertake the flight against Goliath. From this cave they journeyed southwards for 7 hours, with the Dead Sea always on their left-hand side. 2 hours after leaving Hebron, they entered the wilderness where little John the Baptist was in hiding. Their way led them only a bow-shot distance from his cave. I saw the Holy Family wandering through a sandy desert, weary and careworn. The water skin and the jugs of balsam were empty. The Blessed Virgin was greatly distressed, and both she and the infant Jesus were thirsty. They went a little way aside from the path where the ground sank, and there were bushes and some withered turf. The Blessed Virgin dismounted and sat for a little with the child on her knees, praying in her distress. While the Blessed Virgin was thus praying for water, like Agar in the wilderness, I was shown a wonderfully moving incident. The cave in which Elizabeth had hidden her little son was quite near here, on a rocky, wild height, and I saw the little boy not far from the cave wandering about among the stones and bushes as if he were anxiously and eagerly waiting for something. I did not see Elizabeth in this vision. To see this little boy roaming and running about in the wilderness with such confidence made a great impression on me. Just as beneath his mother's heart he had leaped up at the approach of his Lord, so now he was moved by the nearness of his Redeemer, thirsty and weary. I saw the child wearing his lambskin over his shoulders and girt around his waist, and carrying in his hand a little stick with a bit of bark waving on it. He felt that Jesus was passing near and that he was thirsty. He threw himself on his knees and cried to God with outstretched arms, then jumped up, ran, driven by the Spirit, to the high edge of the rocks, and thrust with his staff into the ground, from which an abundant spring burst forth. John ran before the stream to the edge, where it rushed down over the rocks. He stood there and watched the Holy Family pass by in the distance. The Blessed Virgin lifted up the infant Jesus high in her arms, saying to him, "Look, John is in the wilderness." And I saw John joyfully leaping about beside the rushing water and waving to them with the little flag of bark on his stick. Then he hurried back into the wilderness. After a little time the stream reached the traveler's path, and I saw them crossing it and stopping to refresh themselves at a pleasant place where there were some bushes and thin turf. The Blessed Virgin dismounted with the child. They were all joyful. Mary sat down on the grass, and Joseph dug a hollow a little way off for the water to fill. When the water became quite clear, they drank, and Mary washed the child. They sprinkled their hands, feet, and faces with water. Joseph led the donkey to the water, of which it drank deeply, and he filled his water skin. They were all happy and thankful. The withered grass, now saturated with water, grew straight again, and the sun came out and shone on them. They sat there refreshed and full of quiet happiness. They rested for 2 or 3 hours in this place. The last place where the Holy Family sheltered in Herod's territory was not far from a town on the edge of the desert, a few hours' journey from the Dead Sea. Its name sounded like Anem or Anim. They stopped at a solitary house which was an inn for those traveling through the desert. There were several huts and sheds on a hill, and some wild fruit grew round them. The inhabitants seemed to me to be camel drivers, for they kept a number of camels in enclosed meadows. They were rather wild people and had been given to robbery, but they received the Holy Family well and showed them hospitality. In the neighboring town there were also many disorderly people who had settled there after fighting in the wars. Among the people in the inn was a man of 20 called Reuben. March 8th. I saw the Holy Family journeying in a bright starlit night through a sandy desert covered with low bushes. I felt as if I were traveling through it with them. It was dangerous because of the numbers of snakes which lay coiled up among the bushes in little hollows under the leaves. They crawled toward the path, hissing loudly and stretching out their necks toward the Holy Family, who, however, passed by in safety, surrounded by light. I saw other evil beasts there, with long black bodies, short legs, and wings like big fins. They shot over the ground as if they were flying, and their heads were fish-like in shape. I saw the Holy Family come to a fall in the ground, like the edge of a sunken road. They meant to rest there behind some bushes. I was alarmed for the Holy Family. The place was sinister, and I wanted to make a screen to protect them on the side left open, but a dreadful creature like a bear made his way in, and I was in terrible fear. Then suddenly appeared to me a friend of mine, an old priest who had died lately. He was young and beautiful in form, and he seized the creature by the scruff of its neck and threw it out. I asked him how he came to be here, for surely he must be better off in his own place, to which he replied, "I only wanted to help you, and shall not stay here long." He told me more, adding that I should not see him again. The Holy Family always traveled a mile eastwards on the high road. The name of the last place they passed between Judea and the desert sounded very much like Mara. It reminded me of Anna's home, but it was not the same place. The inhabitants here were rough and wild, and the Holy Family could obtain no assistance from them. After this they came into a great desert of sand. There was no path and nothing to show their direction, and they did not know what to do. After some time they saw a dark, gloomy mountain range in front of them. The Holy Family were sorely distressed and fell on their knees, praying to God for help. A number of wild beasts then gathered round them, and at first it looked very dangerous, but these beasts were not at all evil, but looked at them in just the same friendly way as my confessor's old dog used to look at me when he came up to me. I realized then that these beasts were sent to show them the way. They looked towards the mountain and ran in that direction and then back again, just like a dog does when he wants you to follow him somewhere. At last I saw the Holy Family follow these animals and pass over a mountain ridge into a wild and lonely region. It was dark, and the way led past a wood. In front of this wood, at some distance from the path, I saw a poor hut, and not far from it a light hanging in a tree, which could be seen from a long way off to attract travelers. This part of the road was sinister. Trenches had been dug in it here and there were also trenches all round the hut. Hidden cords were stretched across the good parts of the road, and when touched by travelers rang bells in the hut and brought out its thieving inhabitants to plunder them. This robber's hut was not always in the same place. It could be moved about and put up wherever its inhabitants wanted it. When the Holy Family approached the light hanging in the tree, I saw the leader of the robbers with 5 of his companions closing round them. At first they were evilly disposed, but I saw that at the sight of the infant Jesus, a ray like an arrow struck the heart of the leader, who ordered his comrades to do no harm to these people. The Blessed Virgin also saw this ray strike the robber's heart, as she later recounted to Anna, the prophetess, when she returned. The robber now led the Holy Family through the dangerous places in the road into his hut. It was night. In the hut was the robber's wife with some children. The man told his wife of the strange sensation that had come over him at the sight of the child. She received the Holy Family shyly, but was not unfriendly. The travelers sat on the ground in a corner and began to eat some of the provisions which they had with them. The people in the hut were at first awkward and shy, quite unlike it seemed their usual behavior, but gradually drew nearer and nearer to the Holy Family. Some of the other men who had in the meantime stabled Joseph's donkey came in and out, and eventually they all became more familiar and began to talk to the travelers. The woman brought Mary little loaves of bread with honey and fruit as well as goblets with drink. A fire was burning in a hollow in a corner of the hut. The woman arranged a separate place for the Blessed Virgin and brought at her request a trough with water for washing the infant Jesus. She washed the linen for her and dried it at the fire. Mary bathed the infant Jesus under a cloth. The man was very much agitated and said to his wife, "This Hebrew child is no ordinary child, he is a holy child. Ask his mother to allow us to wash our leprous little boy in his bath water. Perhaps it will do him good." As the woman came up to Mary to ask her for this, Our Lady told her, before she had said a word, to wash her leprous boy in the bath water. The woman brought her 3-year-old son lying in her arms. He was stiff with leprosy, and his features could not be seen for scabs. The water in which Jesus had been bathed seemed clearer than it had before, and as soon as the leprous child had been dipped into it, the scales of his leprosy fell off him to the ground, and the child was cleansed. The woman was beside herself with joy and tried to embrace Mary and the infant Jesus, but Mary put out her hand and would not let her touch either herself or Jesus. Mary told the woman that she was to dig a well deep down into the rock and pour this water into it. This would give the well the same healing power. She spoke long with her, and I think the woman promised to leave this place at the first opportunity. The people were extremely happy at the restoration of their child to health, and showed him to their comrades who came in and out during the night, telling them of the blessing that had befallen them. The new arrivals, some of them boys, stood round the Holy Family and gazed at them in wonderment. It was all the more remarkable that these robbers were so respectful to the Holy Family, because in the very same night while they were housing these holy guests, I saw them seizing some other travelers who had been enticed into their lair by the light, and driving them into a great cave deep in the wood. This cave, whose entrance was hidden and grown over by wild plants so that it could not be seen, seemed to be their real dwelling place. I saw several boys in this cave, from 7 to 9 years of age, who had been stolen from their parents, and there was an old woman who kept house there. I saw all kinds of booty being brought in, clothes, carpets, meat, young kids, sheep, and bigger animals too. The cave was big and contained an abundance of things. I saw that Mary slept little that night. She sat still on her couch most of the time. They left early in the morning, well supplied with provisions. The people of the place accompanied them a short way and led them past many trenches on to the right road. When the robbers took leave of the Holy Family, the man said with deep emotion, "Remember us wherever you go." At these words, I suddenly saw a picture of the crucifixion and saw the good thief saying to Jesus, "Remember me when thou shalt come into thy kingdom," and recognized in him the boy who had been healed. The robber's wife gave up this way of life after some time and settled with other honest families at a later resting place of the Holy Family, where a spring of water and a garden of balsam shrubs came into being. After this, I again saw the Holy Family journeying through a desert, and when they lost their way, I again saw various kinds of creeping beasts approaching them, lizards with bat wings and snakes, but they were not hostile and seemed only to want to show them the way. Later on, when they had lost every trace of their path and direction, I saw them guided by a very lovely miracle. On each side of the path, the plant called the Rose of Jericho appeared with its curling leaves surrounding the central flower and the upright stalk. They went up to it joyfully, and on reaching it, they saw in the distance another plant of it spring up, and so throughout the whole desert. I saw too that it was revealed to the Blessed Virgin that in later times the people of this country would gather these flowers and sell them to passing strangers to gain their bread. I saw this happening afterwards. The name of the place sounded like Gase or Gos or Gosen. Then I saw them come to a place by a name like Lepe or Lape. There was a lake there with ditches, canals, and high embankments. They crossed the water on a raft with a big sort of tub on it which the donkey was put. Mary sat with her child on a piece of timber. 2 ugly brown, half-naked men with flattened noses and protruding lips ferried them over. They passed only the outlying houses of this place, and the people here were so rough and unsympathetic that the travelers went on without speaking to anyone. I think that this was the first heathen town. They had been 10 days in the Jewish country and 10 days in the desert. I now saw the Holy Family on Egyptian territory. They were in flat country with green pastures here and there on which cattle were feeding. I saw trees to which idols had been fastened in the shape of infants, wrapped in broad swaddling bands inscribed with figures or letters. Here and there I saw people thick set and fat, dressed like the cotton spinners whom I once saw near the frontiers of the Three Kings. I saw these people hurrying to worship their idols. The Holy Family went into a shed. There were beasts in it, but these went out to make room for them. Their provisions had given out, and they had neither bread nor water. Nobody gave them anything, and Mary was hardly able to feed her child. They did indeed endure every human misery. At last some shepherds came to water the beasts at a closed spring, and at Joseph's urgent request gave them a little water. Then I saw the Holy Family going through a wood, exhausted and helpless. On coming out of it, they saw a tall, slender date palm, with its fruit growing all together like a bunch of grapes at the very top of the tree. Mary went up to the tree with the infant child in her arms and prayed. Lifting the child up to it, the tree bowed down its head to them as if it were kneeling, so that they were able to pick all its fruit. The tree remained in that position. I saw a rabble of people from the last town following the Holy Family, and I saw Mary distributing the fruit from the tree among the many naked children who were running after her. About a quarter of an hour from the first tree, they came to an unusually big sycamore tree with a hollow trunk. They had got out of sight of the people who were following them and hid in the tree as to let them pass by. They spent the night here. Next day they continued through waste and sandy deserts, and I saw them sitting on a sandhill quite exhausted, for they had no water with them. The Blessed Virgin prayed to God, and I saw an abundant spring of water gush forth at her side and run in streams on the ground. Joseph leveled a little sand hill and made a basin for the water, digging a little channel to carry off the overflow. They refreshed themselves with the water, and Mary washed the infant Jesus. Joseph watered the donkey and filled the water skin. I saw tortoises and ugly creatures like big lizards coming to drink at the water. They did the Holy Family no harm, but looked at them in a friendly way. The stream of water flowed in a wide circle, disappearing again in the ground near its source. The space which it enclosed was wonderfully blessed. It soon became green and produced the most delicious balsam shrubs, which grew big enough to give refreshment to the Holy Family on their return from Egypt. Later it became famous as a balsam garden. A number of people came to settle there. Amongst them, I think, the mother of the leprous child who had been healed in the robber's den. Later I had visions of this place. A beautiful hedge of balsam shrubs surrounded the garden, in the middle of which were big fruit trees. Later a deep well was dug there, from which an abundant supply of water was drawn by a wheel turned by an ox. This water was mixed with the water from Mary's well, so as to supply the whole garden. The water from the new well would have been harmful if used unmixed. It was shown to me that the oxen who turned the wheel did no work from midday on Saturday till Monday morning. After refreshing themselves here, they journeyed to a great city called Heliopolis or On. It had wonderful buildings, but much of it had been laid waste. When the children of Israel were in Egypt, the Egyptian priest Potiphar lived here, and it had in his house Asenath, the daughter of Dinah of the Shemites, whom Joseph married. Here also Dionysius, the Areopagite, lived at the time of Christ's death. The city had been devastated by war, but numbers of people had made themselves homes in the ruined buildings. The Holy Family crossed a very high bridge over a broad river which seemed to me to have several arms. They came to an open place in front of the city gate, which was surrounded by a kind of promenade. Here there was a pedestal, thicker below than above, surrounded by a great idol with an ox's head, bearing in its arms something like a child in swaddling bands. The idol was surrounded by a circle of stones like benches or tables, and people came in crowds from the city to lay their offerings on them. Not far from this idol was a great tree under which the Holy Family sat down to rest. They had rested here only for a short time, when there came an earthquake, and the idol swayed and fell to the ground. There was an uproar among the people, and a crowd of canal workers ran up from near at hand. A good man who had accompanied the Holy Family on their way here, I think he was a drain digger, led them hurriedly into town, and they were leaving the place where the idol had stood when the frightened crowd observed them and began assailing them with threats and abuse for having been the cause of the idol's collapse. They had not, however, time to carry out their threats, for another shock came, which uprooted and engulfed the great tree till nothing but its roots showed above the ground. The gaping space where the idol had stood became full of dark and dirty water, in which the whole idol disappeared except for its horns. Some of the most evil among the raging mob were swallowed up in this dark pool. Meanwhile, the Holy Family went quietly into the city and took up their abode near a great heathen temple in the thickness of a wall, where there were a great number of empty rooms. Once at a later time I came over the sea to Egypt and found the Holy Family still living in the great devastated city. It is very extensive and is built beside a great river with many arms. The city can be seen from afar, standing high up. In many places the river flows underneath the buildings. The people cross the arms of the river on rafts which lie there, in water ready for use. I saw quite astonishingly huge buildings in ruins, great masses of solid masonry, halves of towers, and whole or nearly whole temples. I saw pillars, as big as towers, with winding staircases outside. I saw high tapering pillars, completely covered with strange figures, and also a number of big figures like reclining dogs with human heads. The Holy Family lived in the galleries of a great stone building supported at one side by short, thick pillars, some square and some round. People had built themselves dwellings against and under these pillars. Above the building ran a road with much traffic on it. It passed a great heathen temple with 2 courts. In this building was a space with a wall on one side of it, and on the other a row of short, thick pillars. In front of this Joseph had constructed a light wooden building divided off by wooden partitions for them to live in. I saw them there all together. The donkeys were there too, but separated by screens such as Joseph always used to make. I noticed for the first time that they had a little altar against the wall hidden behind one of these screens, a little table covered with a red cloth and a transparent white one over it. There was a lamp above it, and they used to pray there. Later I saw that Joseph had arranged a workshop in his home, and also that he often went out to work. He made long staffs with knobs at the ends and little low round 3-legged stools with a handle at the back to carry them by. He also made baskets and light wicker screens. These were afterwards smeared with some substance which made them solid, and were then used to make huts and compartments against it in the massive masonry of the walls. He also made little, light hexagonal or octagonal towers out of long, thin planks, ending in a point crowned by a knob. These had an opening and could be used to sit in like sentry boxes. They had steps leading up to them. I saw little towers like these here and there in front of the heathen temples and also on the flat roofs. People sat inside them. They were perhaps sentry boxes or little summer houses used to give shade. I saw the Blessed Virgin weaving carpets. I also saw her with other work. She had a stick beside her with a lump fastened to the top of it, but I do not know what she was doing, whether spinning or something else. I often saw people visiting her and the infant Jesus, who lay in a sort of cradle on the floor beside her. Sometimes I saw this cradle raised on a stand like a song trestle. I saw the child lying very contently in his cradle, sometimes with his arms hanging out on each side. Once I saw him sitting up in it. Mary sat close by knitting with a basket on her side. There were 3 women with her. The people in this half-destroyed city were dressed just like those cotton-spinning people whom I saw when I went to meet the 3 kings, except they wore aprons like short skirts. There were not many Jews here, and they seemed to live here on sufferance. North of Heliopolis, between it and the Nile, which there divided into many arms, was the land of Jessen. Amongst its canals was a place where a large number of Jews lived. Their religion had become very degraded. Some of these Jews had been acquainted with the Holy Family, and Mary made various things for them, in return for which they gave her bread and provisions. The Jews in the lands of Jessen had a temple, which they likened to Solomon's temple, but it was very different. I again saw the Holy Family in Heliopolis. They were still living near the heathen temple under the vaulting of the massive walls. Not far off, Joseph built a place of prayer in which the Jews living in the city assembled together with the Holy Family. Before this, they had no meeting place for prayer. The room had a lightly built dome above it, which they could open so as to be under the open sky. In the middle of the room stood a sacrificial table or altar covered with white and red and having scrolls upon it. The priest or teacher was a very old man. The men and women were not so strictly separated at their prayers as in the Promised Land. The men stood on one side and the women on the other. I had a sight of the Blessed Virgin visiting this place of prayer with the infant Jesus for the first time. She sat on the ground leaning on one arm. The child was sitting before her in a little sky blue dress, and she put his hands together on his breast. Joseph stood behind her, as he always does here, though the other men and women stand and sit in separate groups on each side of the room. I was often shown how the little Jesus was already growing bigger and how he was often visited by other children. He could already speak and run quite well. He was much with Joseph and I think went with him when he worked away from home. He wore a little dress like a shirt, knitted or woven in one piece. Some of the idols fell down in the temple near which they lived, just as the statue near the gate had collapsed on their entry into the city. Many people said that this was a sign of the wrath of the gods against the Holy Family, and in consequence they suffered various persecutions.